Okay guys, in this video we will explain why selling your paintings as a painter might be the worst idea ever. Depending on your goals and depending how you do it, it might actually screw over your career for the rest of your life. And it has everything to do with supply and demand chain, something that a lot of artists actually don't really understand how that plays out in the higher end of the art markets. My name is Dries Ketels and I'm an artist myself. And let's just dive into the video, Okay, so here's the thing. Scarcity in the art world is king. Scarcity is king. You want to control that scarcity. In general, the price, the value of art will be determined by three things. Number one, the supply. Number two, the demand. And number three, the marketing. And so those three things need to be one. They need to be one, and you need to be able to control all three. You need to be able to control the supply chain of artworks that come available in that market. You need to be able to manipulate the demand through marketing. And if you can do those things, you can basically put any price on your artwork, kind of, if you want to. Now here's what a lot of artists do, and this is something crucial. Like, you see this happening on Instagram, on YouTube, like a lot of big YouTubers or big Instagrammers. They have a huge following, hundreds of thousands of people and sometimes even millions of followers. And what they do is they leverage that to then sell very cheap artwork. Let's say, for example, 200-300 euro paintings on Etsy, eBay and stuff like that. Now, as a result, they sell hundreds, if not more, paintings, and they completely screw over that supply chain. If there are thousands of paintings from a particular period that you just painted very quickly available, that could come on the market at any given moment because the people who own them don't understand supply and demand chain in the art world, and they are also just not aware of it. They just want to get that short-term gain, that short-term financial gain. If that is a possibility with your art because there's simply an abundance, then there is no serious collector or dealer or gallerist or anything that will want to work with you. And so a lot of times I see, like, I don't really understand why, but like big YouTubers and Instagrammers who still believe that they have a chance of making it in the high-end art market, even though they completely screwed over their supply chain. So let's talk about that supply chain so that we can understand that fully, and we, like, depending on our goals, will not make that mistake or will make it deliberately, and then it's not really a mistake, it's part of your tactic. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about that scarcity. Let's talk about that supply thing, Because collectors, what they want, they of course want to have that scarcity. Why? Because they want to be able to say that they own a particular piece of which there are only 4 available, of that particular type in that particular time. Like, hey, I have this work, there are 3 others available. One is hanging in MoMA, the other one is lost, and then there's another one with a private collector that doesn't want to sell it. Like then you have a piece that is simply completely unavailable. Other collectors or other people know that no matter how much money they have, they cannot buy that. It becomes something that money cannot buy. And that's of course the status that you want to have as somebody of that kind of status and that kind of wealth. And so in that realm of the art market, in that high-end art market, that's kind of the exclusive club of ownership, like the exclusive club of ownership where people belong to because they are one of the few people in the world who possess a particular object. And that's what it's all about in that space. And like, here's actually a good example. Like, I forget what the actual details of that were, but there was an article, I think 1 or 2 years ago, in England. And there was a guy, it was a whole discussion because there was a painter who had most followers on Instagram. I think it was England, perhaps it was America, like most followers of his country, but the art market didn't care about him. And he was doing that interview on television, like, yeah, what happened? I'm the most famous one, but still I cannot sell my paintings expensively or whatever, like they don't really want it. The answer to that problem or that dilemma was simple. He had screwed over his supply chain forever. And so he had no chance anymore to get, he had simply no chance anymore to get towards any real deep recognition in the art world. Why? Because he sold too much for too cheap to random people who don't understand what the art game is about. And so you can, if you want to make it there, you cannot afford that. There are more than enough examples of people who clearly want it. He clearly wanted it, but somehow screwed it over probably without understanding what he was doing. And so the scarcity thing is crucial for collectors. It's also one of the reasons why you don't see a gallerist, when he's selling a work to a particular collector, you don't see him say, well, take your time. Take your time. There's not really any need for anything. If the work happens to be sold tomorrow and you didn't make that final decision, then it's okay. The artist has plenty of work in his studio. Like there are probably 50 paintings just like this one laying down there in his studio for you to buy. Like something like that doesn't happen. Why? Because a gallerist doesn't want to create that abundance. They don't want that. They don't want to create that feeling of abundance, that feeling of omni-availability of art. And so what you see is artists selling on Etsy. They sell, like they have an Etsy shop with like 100 paintings, of which 10 are sold, and they're all very cheap, and you can see all the traffic going through that shop. Like, they screwed it up, depending on what their goal are. Perhaps their goal is something completely different. I don't know those people. I cannot judge that. But some of them have this dream without realizing that they're actually screwing up right there. Like one of the famous art dealers, William Aquavella, he once said, you can remake your money, but you can never remake the painting. What he meant with that was that once a painting comes to market and you don't buy it, especially in that high end, we're talking high end here, and you don't buy it, chances are that you will never get a second chance in your life to buy that painting because of that scarcity that's created in that market. And so that's really crucial to understand for us. Like, let's say, and you could, for example, some of you probably watching right now are thinking like, but hey Dries, what about Andy Warhol? What about Andy Warhol? He created shitloads of artworks, and his prices are fairly high. And he's on top of that, it's not even painting, it's printmaking. So like what about that? Now it turns out, at that time, Andy Warhol was indeed perceived as an artist who had some abundance going on. But when his catalog Raisonné came out in 2002, what we saw is that, first of all, he made way less work than we initially thought, or that the collectors at that moment perceived or thought of. And on top of that, all the prints that he made were all original. None of the prints were the same. He didn't make the same print over and over again. That was somewhat of a misconception at that moment. And so there was actually way more scarcity than people realized, which meant that the whole price game, the whole supply and demand chain could be controlled, and therefore the whole, like, there was a possibility to just go, like that became clear. And so there's a misconception around Andy Warhol that he is mass production, when he's actually probably way more unique and way more scarce than most people realize. And perhaps let's close with one more example. Like Monet's famous water lilies. You know, like one of the most famous series of art ever made, with the largest demand, especially in the impressionistic realm. It's probably one of the pieces or series of pieces with the highest demand. And so it's pretty interesting to look at that. Now, he made 79 paintings of the water lilies in his garden. 79, out of which 27 are owned or are part of museum collections. So they will never come to the market again. Never. 27. 3 are lost, which means that there are 49 in private hands. 49 in private hands. From one of the most famous painters, of one of the most famous types of paintings, 49. Now compare that number in terms of the demand and marketing done around that artist. We're talking about an artist that has been featured in all courses around art globally for the last decades and decades and decades. Like that amount of demand and marketing creates an obnoxious amount of collectors who actually want those pieces. If you then compare that to artists who have an Etsy shop where they sell a seaside, you know, like a traditional seaside in oil, and they sell hundreds of that particular thing for 40 or 50 or 100 euro, it's all cool. And I have nothing, by the way, I have nothing against that. You can just do that. I don't care. The sad thing is that most of them don't realize that they're actually limiting their possibility right there and closing that door towards a dream that they might have forever. And so I don't want you to experience that, and don't want you that what happens to you. So that's sad. Don't do that unless you don't really care about high-end markets. And if you do care and you want to learn more about that, make sure to subscribe. And then I see you next time probably. Ciao, ciao, ciao.